Hello, my name is Marnie, and I'd like to welcome you to Frankston City Library's FrankTALK with best-selling author Darry Fraser. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Frankston City Libraries operates, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and future. I'd also like to extend that acknowledgement to the elders of any other communities who may be joining us today. Now, best-selling author Darry Fraser has done it again, bringing us yet another Australian fast-paced historical drama fiction with The Last Truehart. A woman alone and a charismatic private detective are caught up in a dangerous quest to discover her true identity in this thrilling historical adventure romance set in 19th century Victoria. Darry, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Marnie. Thanks for having me, and hello, everybody.
And you have done it again, Darry. The Last Truehart was a really enjoyable pace. It had such a good pace to it, and it's such a delight to read. Where did this particular story start for you?
Well, goodness, everything for me seems to start with a kernel of something or other, whether it's a little turn of phrase I hear at the supermarket, or I might be reading through my emails and something from Trove will pop up. But this particular story, The Last Truehart, I was researching something else which I can't remember now, and I saw a very small headline that said CSS Shenandoah causes a furor in Melbourne or something like that, and I thought, Shenandoah, where, what is that? So in I went down the rabbit hole. 3 hours later, I come up with this huge story that the American Civil War ship docked at Williamstown in 1865 amid all the fighting that was going on in the US at the time. And it enlisted illegally 42 colonial men and went. So I thought, okay, 1865, that's not really my area, but I'll have a look. How can I connect it to the 1890s? And so from there, away I went. I was lost for months.
And I said, we do open with that scene of a gentleman getting on. I don't want to give too much away. A gentleman getting onto the boat, and I remember reading it, going, "This is in Victoria. This is Geelong, but we're talking American, which is, any century. It's mine. I love America."
Yes. Yeah.
I am curious, obviously with that one, that's what spurred you to continue with that location and that time period. But how do you choose generally where to set your books, both geographically? So we've got a lot in Victoria and South Australia, and then the time period. So obviously The Last Truehart, we're the 19th century and we're in Geelong.
I think sometimes the theme or the premise of the story, and like that little nugget of the Shenandoah, I think that will say, rightio, we are setting the story here. The 1890s, that particular decade, is really something I enjoy. I enjoy the latter half of the 19th century, but I do find the later decades interest me more. And of course, I was born and bred in Victoria, in Dandenong, and since travelled around Victoria in my early years, then I moved to Alice Springs, and then I moved to South Australia, to Kangaroo Island. So I guess I know those two states, or three states if you include the territory, reasonably well. And because I've walked the land, if you like, underfoot, and I know what the vegetation is in those few places, I have that sensory idea. So when my characters are walking through, I have that same image, if you like, in my head. So I think it chooses me.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
I go with that.
You are saying 1890s. What drew you to that time period specifically, and historical fiction in the first place?
Long ago, back in the dark ages, for me anyway, my family moved from Melbourne to Swan Hill, and around about that same time, the Pioneer Association was just parking the Gem in situ, and I thought, what is this? What is this huge ship on the river? What is this? And I was very young at the time, and I when the Pioneer Park got going, you had to enter the park through the boat. So for me, it was like a portal or standing stones. So once I got from 20th century at the time back into the 19th century, I was amazed by people wandering around in costume, basically, horse and carts, the shops and the clothes and everything else. And it just gave me this special, can't really explain it. It's like time traveling, I guess. And I've never forgotten that.
Okay.
And then, of course, on the river, by the time the 1890s had rolled around, river trade was starting to fall away a little bit. The railways had come through. So everything about how we have got to where we are right now interests me. And I think the 1890s, we were right on the precipice, especially of a new century and federation. But it would have been a very difficult time for people, at the same time very exciting with the hope they had for the future.
Is there a particular place that you want to set a story, but you haven't quite found that story or the characters yet? Like, is there somewhere you think, I'd really love to write a story about Frankston in the 1890s, and I haven't found the right story or characters yet?
Well, gosh, now you mention that, but no, not really. I must admit, as you tour around with your book, going to see, or as we used to do, going to the libraries and so on, again, something will just strike me, and I'll pick that up and run with that. But I don't look too far ahead either. I've just published, as you know, The Last Truehart. The next book is already finished, so I'm on the lookout for something else again. But I do find that the countryside, Victorian countryside, says something to me. Perhaps it's a home, but also the arid lands of South Australia are very attractive as well. So no, I think when I get that little tap on the shoulder or hammered blow to the head, it'll be that's when the story will come in. So yeah.
And I do get that. I was talking to a friend recently about talking about Frankston and the history of Frankston, and it turns out her family on her mother's side were some of the first settlers of Frankston, and a lot of the local streets, like Wells Street, Davies Street, are actually named after her family.
Oh.
And she turned around, she actually said to me, and I thought of you when she said it. She said, "Oh, my great 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 grandmother, or whatever level of family it was, gave birth to the first white child for this area, but it's under dispute." And I thought, that would be such a good plot for a story, that it's under dispute that your child was the first white child born to settlers in this area. Like, that's, how does that become a dispute? And I guess that's why we're living in a very, very different time now, that we go, how is that important?
Yep.
But yeah, very, very different time.
Mm-hmm.
With that in mind, what is your research process like when you're starting a new book?
Again, I look for where I am and what the theme might be, but on that particular point, and as something to zero in on, in Elsa Goody, Elsa lives in a little town in Victoria called Robe. It's on the seaside. And in 1896, which was the first year in the colony that allowed women to vote, there is a tiny wee article in a newspaper, which I fluked on, that said, in Robe at 9:45 in the morning, the first woman came to the council chambers to vote. And I thought, well, what was her name? Can't find it anywhere. I went to
Mrs. Norman something.
Mrs. Bloggs. So I went to the State Library of South Australia, and they came back and said to me, if you can find those records of that first electoral vote, especially the year that women were voting, then let us know, because they have disappeared for all time. So I was able then, hearing that from, I thought, an expert, a guru, and local historians who didn't know either. So I used Elsa Goody as the first woman to vote in Robe. And that was a lot of the premise of the story, her getting back to Robe to vote. So your research takes you in some truly marvelous places. a snippet I'll retain for a future story was looking through the advertisements. And in those days, the advertisements and the classifieds were all on the front pages of the newspaper. And there's one little advertisement that says, "Dear Father, thank you very much for asking after your new grandchild. He's grown somewhat and he seems to be very smart, which of course you are not. Your daughter, Emily." And I thought, whoa, there must have been some problem there between father and daughter, and she gave it to him both barrels in a newspaper. So they weren't backward in coming forward either, which is also a delight to learn. So lots of snippets, lots of history. Yeah, I've got tingles now as I talk about it. So I'm really excited for what I do, and I love it, and I'm just really grateful other people love it as well.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to hear that story one day. Now, what did you find the most fascinating while you were researching The Last Truehart?
Well, it was the ship. I had absolutely no idea that the Shenandoah docked at Williamstown in 1865, mid-war.
It's
So it docked for repairs,
a
and
long way.
yes, well, they were going to fight in the Pacific. So they docked for repairs, and he was a very smart man, the captain, but he was very sneaky too. So he almost declared war on the governor of Victoria at the time. And he was very, I'll say bolshy, but that word was a little bit later than the time, but very, almost like a bully. And he knew he needed more men to fight. And I'm thinking, well, where's he going to get them from? Only to learn that 42 men stowed away illegally. So the whole thing was fascinating to me. But I needed a connection to that later decade. So I tracked the ship, and it goes into the Pacific, and they fought there, and they raided other ships and killed people and all sorts of things. So I was able to bring the connection back to the 1890s by way of a family, and then learning what happened after the war, after the American Civil War, and how it affected our Constitution was absolutely incredible to me. So that was the part that really fired my interest. Yeah.
Yeah. And I must say, reading that first chapter, when I found it, and I'm not giving anything of the plot line away when I say this. Well, no, I don't think I am. That those ships, or the ship that's in particular in the story, it was basically open to tours when it did dock. So people were walking through, and that's essentially how the captain was getting these guys. And you're reading the story going, mate, he's leaving. Like he's gone. Like I'm reading it going, don't you dare, you bastard.
Yeah. Yeah. I was hoping that came across.
Yeah.
At the time, I think it was there for 3 weeks at Williamstown. And when it first arrived, there were over 7,000 people went to have a look at that. And the crew was invited to Craig's Hotel in Ballarat, which was the big flash do in Ballarat. And they had a captain's dinner. But at the time, Britain was neutral in the US war. So our colony was neutral, and everybody got their knickers in a twist about the fact that there was this American warship docked, just splayed out there as if she was a lady on a lounge, and really giving it to the locals about, just try it, just try to get rid of us, just try it. He threatened to fire on Melbourne City, which was 5 miles away at the time, so whatever that is in kilometres, 8 kilometres or something. Yeah. And they had the capacity to do that. So, of course, the governor was beside himself. But the amount of people that went on board was truly amazing, because it's not really a big ship. So 7,000 at the time was, yes, and a few did sneak on board. Well, 42 that we know about snuck on board.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what challenges have you encountered while you're writing your characters, especially one like Stella Truehart or Stella Truehart Smith?
Well, you sort of layer first of all, a name just drops out of the sky. So what's this person look like? And then you try to give them a life, if you like. So you do build from scratch, and of course you can't do that on your page. You have to do that on another page. So we call that backstory or character background, and we don't want all that information dumped into the story. So the challenge is to layer up your character. Easy stuff first: name, hair color, eye color, and then get, oh, so okay, if she lives with her grandparents, what happened to her mum and dad? And so you go, but just like we would if we were looking at a long lost cousin or something, we would try to find what their story was. So the layering of a character, it comes in at different times, and when I'm about halfway through a book, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and the character, you'll think I'm a bit crazy now, the character says to me, I wouldn't do that. So I have to go back and say, you're right, cross that bit out, start again. So I think it's not a difficult thing. It's just something you're aware of with every page that you write or every word that you put down for that character, whether they would, whether they wouldn't, what motivates them. As far as the rest of it goes, I don't think I can tell you. I just roll on along with it, and oh, that fella looks like a crook, I'll bring him in somehow, or I'll have a cart run over that guy.
Yeah.
He's out of the game. I don't like him at all. So you sort of engender a relationship with your characters, and they do tell you how the story's going to go. So it's not difficult for me at all. I just follow orders.
And what I'm hearing from that is when we talk about a writing process, you are not a planner.
I'm not a planner. I'm what they call a pantster. I fly by the seat of my pants. I do write a plot. I don't know why everyone says it. I do write a plot, and then I think, oh my Lord, that is so boring. I'm not sticking to that. And that
You
means
started.
Yeah, I've got something down, something to give my publisher. See how good I am. I've written a plot. Sure, Darry. Sure. Tell us another. Pull the other leg. So I tend to look at the story. Well, the story is a journey for the characters, and it's a journey for me as well, I guess, if we can put it like that. It's something that I want to be exciting. Sometimes I don't know the end myself. Again, characters will let me know how that's going to work out. For certain types of books, like mine, in the particular genre I'm in at the moment, it does have to have what we call a happily for now ending. It doesn't have to be a Cinderella ending, but it does have to be happily for now. And that's probably more real than happily ever after, because we know that doesn't last very long. So the whole thing is a journey. Sometimes what I might think will be the very last page becomes page 30 rather than page 390. So I fly by the seat of my pants, and I'm good with that.
Excellent. Do you find you still have to write sequentially, or can you move around? Do you find yourself rewriting something midway, or how do you go about that? And how do you stay motivated during a manuscript as well?
So my writing process is start at the first page. And I do have to say that the first line in every one of my books, I must write at least 4,574 times. And each time I open the manuscript, that first line will change somewhat, might change back, but it certainly changes. So I'll have that starting point. And then, that the first chapter has to do most of your work for you. So that's got to be a really strong chapter. And I write sequentially, I guess, because the characters, once again, will take me through that. I know that A and B character, male and female, hero and heroine, have to end up here at the end. So we've got that overarching, boy, we've got to get them there somehow. And as for writing sequentially, when you get down to your edits that come back to you from the publisher, often they will say, you know what, we think this chapter will be better at chapter 2, not chapter 5. Or I might say, before I send it off, oh, he could probably come in a lot earlier, that chapter. So you can chop it, but then you've got to be very careful about what you've put in that chapter, so it makes sense a bit further along. So you can see my hands moving on.
Yeah, I love it.
That's how I do it on the page.
I'm also curious to know, do you just work on the one book at any one time, or are you someone who has multiple projects on the go?
Uh, Tricky one. I have to jump from the 19th century into the 21st century. So I'm sure one part of my brain is still in, long dresses, and the other one is working with computers and things. I did try writing two books simultaneously and found that was really quite exhausting. But what I do tend to do is write one every 6 months, if you like. If I'm changing genres, and I do have another project, it tends to take a day or two for one genre to set itself aside so I can concentrate on the other.
Okay.
So again, that's just knowing yourself as how you work, really. Mm.
Hmm. Is there something surprising that you yourself have learned while writing your novels?
This might sound unusual, but writing and researching the 19th century, I don't think we've changed an awful lot.
It's a little bit scary, isn't it?
Yeah, our attitudes take a long, long time to change. Our laws certainly take a long time to change. Technology's changed, and you could poke a stick at what's changed in technology, but when it comes down to people and feelings and family and things like that, no, we haven't changed. And it didn't surprise me so much as those things. That means people of any age who might pick up my books and read them can identify with what's going in the book. So
Hmm.
that became something that was surprising. I think I did it, wrote like that naturally, but that actually spoke to a lot of people about. One young woman wrote to me and says, "Oh, I've learned all about domestic violence in your books. I thought it was a modern thing." No,
What?
yeah. So quite interesting that because I think, let's say women in particular, have had laws changed around them for a lot of years, we haven't come as far as we think we've come. And
Well, it's still happening.
that it's, yeah,
So,
well, it's been interesting watching.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. Now, with the current pandemic situation, how has that impacted you? How have you found your writing and creativity during this time?
Well, certainly being here on Kangaroo Island in South Australia, we've been more fortunate than
Mm,
Victoria, for instance. But my sister and brother are still in Melbourne, so that, of course, our hearts were all there with everybody, and it meant that I could look at what I do here and say, hand on my heart. I'm able to, if we go into lockdown here, I'm fairly self-contained,
yeah.
she says. Anyway, when we got our orders for 6 days lockdown, I thought, right, I'm self-contained, I can do this. And I found I froze.
Mm,
And it was really quite hard to work out why I did that. When I sit here day in, day out in the bat cave doing what I do, I think it was, now we must do this. And I was prepared. Um, what are you going to do? And I sat here going, oh, twiddle, 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 goodness, vacuuming. Maybe I'll do the vacuuming. Mind you, the vacuuming didn't get done, but
of course.
I did other things. I did a little bit of promo work. I did a little bit of, I tidied up the office, which is awful. Goodness, I can't find a thing. So the creative process was a little bit stymied. And it took 2 or 3 days for that to come good. But of course, we had a yo-yo lockdown. We're in full lockdown. The 24 hours later, no, we're not. So we all sort of waited a little bit. Yeah, so it's been a strange time, and of course,
Mm.
it's been a terrible time for Victorian people. And like I said before, our hearts were definitely with everybody there. That time it was just, yeah,
I think it's definitely the difference between choosing to do it and
true.
somebody telling you you have to and taking away that liberty. And
Yes,
I was the same. I thought, oh, this is a really great opportunity to sort out the house, declutter, write more of my book. and it was just work went crazy, and suddenly you're not allowed to leave the house without a mask. You can't go to your neighbors. Like, it was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
certainly a different time, one I don't want to have to
Yes.
experience again. But
No.
I think it also, I'm wondering whether that feeling, perhaps knowing that people have experienced that in historical times, whether that will show up in a future book for you.
Well, of course, looking back, and we're now looking back 100 years at the Spanish flu, when we see all the photos that are coming to light about the Spanish flu, people were all in their masks or not. There were naughty people, there were good people, but they had a different kind of isolation to what we've, a lot of them had
Definitely.
their gardens were full of vegetables, I mean, I haven't read a lot about it, I must say, but I think a lot of writers at the moment are a little bit reticent about thinking how this particular period of time is going to enter their stories. I think if we can get that distance, be moved past it. But I do see that our populations have, in Australia anyway, have begun to understand that whilst there were some of us who protested having to do what we're told, basically, we came through so well that as a nation, I think it showed that we're okay with this. We're okay with this. And I think that sort of thing might show up again. That iconic Aussie might have just returned, to be honest.
That would be nice. I must say, there was a bit of camaraderie that came out of it.
Yes.
And I've had so many people say to me, I suddenly feel like I have the sense of community back that I had growing up.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I think, whilst we say we have a right to do this and the other thing, we have a right to do those things because laws have been hard fought, wars have been hard won, and this is just a sacrifice we have to make. And my generation has never known it. Younger generations have certainly not known it, but my mum and dad's generation definitely knew it. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we should be really proud of what we've done. The fact that, especially in Victoria, so many donut days, as we call them. But I think we should all be really proud, because while we did have a few of those people, it was very much, what, we just have to do what we have to do to get through. And I think that's always been the Australian spirit. It's
Yes,
there's always somebody worse off than us. And we always just have to do what we have to do to get through.
Yeah. And we will.
Absolutely. Now, tell me, can you share your publishing story with us? I actually haven't heard your publishing story. How did you go from being a writer to a published author?
Well, how much time do we have, Marnie?
Another half an hour. Go.
I should be able to squeeze it in then. Well, a writer, I think I've always been a writer. From the moment I knew how to hold a pen or pencil, I was a writer. I was a storyteller, put it like that. I probably didn't understand. Nobody probably understood a word I was saying, but I've always had that storytelling little gene. And when you're at school and in those days it was called composition or essay, I used to get full marks for that. I thought, oh, wonderful, I'm a writer. Oh, how wonderful. But I don't really know what they were trying to teach us. But as soon as I tried to transfer that to a publisher, it was like, oh, for heaven's sake, go away and learn your craft. Oh, goodness. All right. What did I learn at school then? So I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And I couldn't work out how I would make a living from it. So it was always writing on the quiet, out there making a living. Stories would come in, scribbles would go down. Anyway, I got to the ripe old age of 22, and I was in Alice Springs at the time, and I thought, I'm just going to write this bestseller. So I know some of your listeners here will know exactly where I'm coming from when I say this. So I sat down, because I'd lived at Swan Hill for some time on the river. I sat down and I wrote this wonderful story. It was going to be the biggest bestseller ever, about a young woman who heads up a fleet of paddle steamers on the Murray River, and she's nailing it. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there who know this story. Anyway, I'm watching the telly in Alice Springs, and it only just got to Alice Springs, so we're all very fascinated. And there's this TV series, All the Rivers Run, on the telly. And I sat there, mouth open, couldn't believe it, picked up my manuscript, put it in the bottom drawer for 30 years.
Yeah.
30 years.
You're like, that's where I got that story concept from. Boom.
Yeah, well, anyway, I kept writing, and I won competitions for short stories. So I was quietly encouraged after being stomped all over. And in the year 2000, I approached a publisher again and was told that nobody's interested in Australian historical drama. Forget it. Rightio. So back into the Batcave I go again, and I've tried my hand at contemporary romances. I am so not good at that. So kept going. Anyway, things changed dramatically for me around about 2012, and I thought, it's now or never. You may as well just get that manuscript transcribed, grow it up a bit, do your thing. So I went along to a conference where we were able to pitch to our publishers. I pitched to Harlequin, which is now a part of HarperCollins, and they picked up that original story, which is now Daughter of the Murray. And the day I got that phone call, I don't think there's been a better day in my life. So from there, I have now written, The Last Truehart is the 6th standalone novel, and I've written a novella called The Drover Comes Home for Christmas, which is my favourite of all favourite stories.
Which is that one in this one?
That one's in this one.
I borrowed this the other day for I've got 2 weeks off over Christmas, and I borrowed this one because I saw your name on it.
It's my absolute favourite. And I have to say, when you're reading it, you've just got to read it as if you were a little kid.
Okay. I will enjoy it. I might even do it this weekend. Yes. Let's not wait till Christmas.
No, it's only it's a shorty, and you can let me know what you think. But it's almost as if with that one, it's I was writing The Widow of Ballarat. So it was published 2018. So that would have been 2017. They said, would you mind just slotting in a small novel, 30,000 words? Oh, sure. I said, right.
Do it on the weekend.
So, yeah. So I think Widow of Ballarat is like, and we work in number of words, so 100,000 words. So Drover is about 30,000, and it just flew onto the page somehow.
Wow.
So yes, I absolutely love it. I hope you do too.
Oh, wonderful. And I must say, I am curious to know, and I think it's about the motivation behind a manuscript. Do you have certain rituals you partake in? Do you sit down and write a certain number of words a day? Because I can tell you, I've got to 7,000 words in my manuscript, and the idea of having to write 100,000 scares me. I got to that, and I was like, and we're done for 12 months. How do you stay motivated?
I love what I do, and at this time in my life, I made sure it was all I was going to do. Everything else could just stand aside. This is me. I'm coming through. So the day starts, or at daylight, you may as well say. Hamish the Wonder Dog and I go out for a 4 to 5K walk, come back, do the chores, leap in the shower, get beautiful, and then I'm ready for my day's work. Now, sometimes that is reading all the rubbish words I wrote yesterday and going, oh my Lord, just put that in the bin. Or it's researching a little bit more, or I do tend to edit as I go. So the process could be 30 words for the day, or it could be 3,000 words for the day. And I never know what that's going to look like. I always try to write, but I never try to force a particular word count. And then usually I end up in a place at the end of the day that I never thought I would be when I started. So it's all a surprise. It's all lovely. It's all a journey.
Wonderful. Now tell me, what's on your reading pile at the moment? And is there a particular book that it's your go-to to recommend to people?
Oh, goodness me. I don't think I've, well, no, I don't think I could. What's on my reading pile? Talk about 54 thoughts going through at the same time there. I am reading Karen Slaughter's Pieces of Her. So that's a crime thriller. I think last week I wrote, or not last week, A Room Made of Leaves by Kate Grenville, and wonderful, wonderful piece of fiction that is. Gosh, I can't remember. I've got A Fortunate Life sitting on my desk. So that's kind of something I pick up and go, oh yeah, that's how Rabbitoh worked, or that's how he what he used to polish up his saddle or something. So that's quite a handy little reference. I can't remember what else is there. The stack's fairly high.
Yeah,
We call it the
I know
TV
that
car
feeling.
pile. Yeah.
Yeah, the to be read pile.
Yes. Yeah. Now, there's lots of books I'd love to read, and I only get about half an hour when I get into bed, and then I'm zonked out. So, yeah, it's my pile grows higher than not.
I must say, when I started working at Frankston City Libraries, I was I was introduced to audiobooks through that.
Yes.
I'd never considered them. To me personally, I used to look at an audiobook and go, it's a lazy person's way to read a book.
No.
But I am such a slow reader. So I actually listened to your book on Talking Book.
Ah,
And I have to say, the narrator is wonderful. Her
yes.
accent is perfect for the time period. It is such an easy audiobook to listen to.
Well, Rebecca Macaulay has done my narration since day dot. And I'll tell you this funny little story that came about. So Daughter of the Murray came out in 2016, and the audiobook came out a little later because that was the first one they did. Anyway, I'm minding my own business, and my hairdresser rings me and says, Darry, I've got a lady here who'd like to talk to you. And I said, have you? I'm thinking, hairdo? What's going on here? It's my little hometown on Kangaroo Island. And she said, no, her daughter narrates your books. And I went, oh, my Lord. Yes, of course I'll meet them. And it turns out Rebecca's parents live here on Kangaroo Island, and Rebecca's in Melbourne.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I must say, it's a bit like when you and I first connected.
Yes.
And you said to me, Frankston, I actually grew up I was born in Dandenong. And I went, my dad was born in Dandenong. And you actually said to me, my dad used to own the newsagents in Dandy West. And I said, not on the corner of Jones Road and what was the other, Hemmings Street.
Hemmings, yeah.
And you went, yes. And I'm like, your father would have known my grandfather.
Yeah.
Because my grandfather walked down to that news agency every weekend to pick up the Winning Post. That's our family story that we all share, because he loved his horses. And that was his thing. And he had relationships with every single store owner, whoever it was, throughout the whole time he lived there. And he'd walk down on the weekend, grab the bread and the rolls and maybe the fish and chips from a few doors down. Yes. And he'd walk back up Jones Road. And then as grandkids, we did that as well with him. So
well, those fish and chips were the best.
They were amazing.
They were the best.
And every time I walked in, they knew who I was. And it was just, Hemmings Street fish and chips were always wonderful in Dandy West.
Good one.
Now tell me, what is your advice to any aspiring authors who might be watching this?
Well, first would be keep writing no matter what. I must admit, the knocks I felt I had when I was a younger person, I'm not talking about all the rivers run, but the knocks I had put me back into my cave a little bit. So, but the other thing is to read a lot, and of course read for pleasure, but what I tend to do now is look at a sentence and think, how did they put that together? So learning your craft, it doesn't mean plagiarizing, it doesn't mean copying, it means technique that you can pick up and run with. Or how do they build their characters? Or does that sound real if you read it out loud? And if you are lucky enough to be picked up by a publisher, I always say to people, leave your ego at the door, because when the editor gets hold of your work, they will not take away your voice, but they will improve your work. So I think as you're going from first putting that pen to paper or tapping on your keyboard, comes out of your head, flows through, and you can see it on the page. Read it out loud. If it sounds good, it probably is good. If it sounds dodgy, it's dodgy. So and then read a lot, write a lot, and always be improving your craft.
Oh, wonderful. And what do you hope that readers will take away from The Last Truehart?
Oh, a few hours of time travel for themselves. I love to be transported when I read, so I hope I've written something that will transport my readers. Yeah.
I must say, it is such a pleasant read. It's just
Oh,
lovely.
good.
Like it's
Oh,
just a
thank you.
lovely, easy read. And there were little bits in it that I loved, like with Bendigo Barrett when we're first introduced, and she says Bendigo, and he goes, "Oh well, if it had have been born later, it would have been Sandhurst."
Yeah.
But I love the fact you got that little bit of history in there. That it was just a
Hmm.
little tidbit that
Yeah.
Bendigo actually changed names, and then it went
Yeah.
back to Bendigo.
And went back.
Um,
Yeah.
and I found myself chuckling, and I was like, "Oh, okay, this is a good book."
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, that's good. Thanks. Yeah. It's I mean, characters should never be wooden or cutouts, and you do your best to round them out as people. And I think he wasn't droll, but Bendigo Barrett he knows who he is now, so he can have a bit of fun at his own expense.
Yeah, definitely maturity, if you like.
Mature.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, tell me, what's next for you?
Well,
You did say you finished a book, so when are
yes,
we going
that
to see that?
well, where are we now? 220? No, 2020. So 2021, around about this time, if all goes well. The next book out is my working title for it is The Unconventional Miss Prudence North. And don't ask me where that came from, but out it came.
I
And
like it though.
yeah, she's a young woman who's come back to the colony after being in Scotland, where she was studying at St Andrews University, uh, hoping to skip across to the continent to learn more about the emerging science of forensics. And as it turns out, a family problem has occurred at home, so she has to come back. Now she has a dark medical secret in her family history, so she's not looking to marry and have children, and she's got to focus everything of all of her energy into her work. So something does happen that surprises her, and she might have to think twice. So I had a look at women at universities in the day, of course, the emerging forensic science, how people reconciled their lives if they had knowledge that would preclude them from marriage and children, and also a congenital disease and what was known about it at the time. So I had a lovely time in history again. And one of the things that I did found interesting was the history of the Austin Hospital. So I've used that as well.
Wonderful.
Mm.
Now, you are actually working on something else at the moment that doesn't take place in the 19th century.
True. It takes place in about 2012 because we have to avoid the you know what in the last 12 months. And so it's a crime. Yeah, it's crime. I don't know about thriller, although, yeah, I think it will be. But it was interesting because when you talk about researching the 1890s, you've got lots of information at your fingertips. And you probably got much the same when you're researching 2012. But I had to remember, what sort of mobile phone did I have then?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I
Nokia
had a
3310. That's
yeah,
what
yeah.
you had.
I had a flip phone, and then I had a little slidey thing.
Yeah.
And of course, at one point, I've got my character checking Facebook and Instagram. No, wrong. They didn't
No.
do that on the phones then. So that's been quite interesting. But that is at the moment set in a fictional town. I'll say Outback Victoria, but that could change.
Coastal
And
Frankston. No, I'm kidding.
no, no, well, a little bit further than sort of
Yeah.
north, west, not far, a couple 100 k's. And she's a police officer who's been shot. And the story doesn't open with that, but it opens with her going home to recuperate and all the layers of things that she's uncovering while she's there. And I'm having loads of fun.
It
Yes,
sounds
loads of
amazing.
fun.
Yeah, I
Yes,
can't
don't have to
wait.
worry about hoop skirts or people not wearing undies or anything like
Yeah.
that because we all wear undies now.
Now we're in
But
jeans and t-shirts. It's all good.
yes, it's all good. Yes.
Now tell me, Darry, where can people find you online?
Well, Facebook, of course, if you're into Facebook, there's two pages. What's personal page is Darry Fraser, and the other one is Darry Fraser Books. So that's easy to find me. I am on Instagram. I think that's just Darry Fraser as well. I'm pretty easy to find. And
Excellent.
I have a website, darryfraser.com.
Wonderful. And I do love that website because for the last two books, you've actually got little almost trailer videos.
I do.
They're
And that was
very
so
cute.
exciting.
I love them.
Yes. Elsa Goody was the first one. And uh, of course, Elsa's riding around on her horse through the bush, and there's gold coins and everything. And the music, the score is just wonderful. Of course, everyone's saying, "Is this a movie? Is this a movie?" And I'm saying, "I
It
wish, I
could
wish."
be.
We keep putting it out there. Any
Yeah.
movie people out there. And so with the Last Truehart, I wanted the whole style of it to be very different, and that's what I've got. But I hope it's received just as well as the first one was. And it's really, I look at a lot of book trailers and they're quite static, or with things that fade in a little bit, or
Mm.
whatever. And I wanted a mini movie, and that's what I got. So I'm thrilled to bits.
Oh, you absolutely achieved that. So
Oh, good.
well done.
Thanks. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
Darry, we are out of time,
Oh,
but thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody.
Now, Darry's novels are available to borrow via our digital library, which you can access for free with your Frankston City Library's membership via our website, or you can pop the physical books on reserve for collection from one of our libraries. If you're not a member, you can sign up straight away via our website. And once I finish these ones, they'll be available for you to collect. So you can also purchase The Last Truehart from Robertson's Bookshop in Frankston via their online store, or you can pop in there and say hello. Keep an eye on the Frankston City Library's website for the great Frank Talks that we have coming up in the new year. And we've also got I won't say debut, it's her second novel. Fantasy author Sam Hawke is joining us next week. So thank you so much for joining us for today's Frank Talk with Darry Fraser for Frankston City Libraries.